What's going on? There's a part of me that wants to say, if it's Sunday, it's N-urch Day. But that's never been true because we were already every other Sunday and we've taken the last month of Sundays off.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that phrase always bugged me out. A month of Sundays. I don't know what that means. Welcome back to N-urch, you guys. I'm glad you're here. Come on into the chat and greet somebody in Reason's name. What's going on, fellas? How y'all feeling this morning?
Feeling good.
That's right.
Yeah. Feeling good. It's a little cold. I don't know how it is out there in Philly.
What's cold for you? Let's have that conversation.
The 30, it's like 30 degrees here.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to look at my phone right now and I'll just humble you real quick. It's 13 degrees in Philadelphia. All right.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's very cold.
Yeah.
It's a cold world.
Jay, what's it like where you are?
We'll just say that it's somewhere around there. You know, I'm somewhere on the planet.
That's right.
Roaming about, seeking whom I may devour. I'm going to and fro throughout all the earth. Come on here, via the internet.
Yeah. In case anybody said, "Wait, it's not 13 degrees in Philly right now." This is a recast, a recording of the N-urch. So, but yeah, welcome back. It's been a minute since we've been together. And it's 2025. This is the first N-urch of the new year. Anything new going on? What's new?
Not a whole lot. I don't know. So I did for those of you who are on Facebook or friends, I recently made a decision to kind of take the counter-apologist kind of part of my life, I guess, into my kind of private public sphere, I guess you'd say. Yeah. So, I titled it "Why I Left Christianity," and it's about 6-7 paragraphs long. Posted on Instagram as well, and
Wow.
yeah, you guys might be surprised that I did it at all. Like people are like, oh, you like, yeah, but like this is what we've been doing with ICAPA, or my involvement has been more or less kind of close to the chest. So I haven't really told a lot of people in my sphere,
Wow.
or in my world. Yeah.
So what motivated you to finally take this part of your life into your private sphere?
I think for a long time, like I think it was like months since last year, that I felt like I should try to do something. And then I think what sped it up was literally, not to get into politics, but it's literally the inauguration of
Okay.
Trump. Yeah. So
How so? Like what did that have to do with you saying I need to say something?
so I think it's more of a personal kind of release. That's definitely one reason. Second one was trying to be I wanted the people that know me to know me even more. So I felt like I had to talk about this. And then
Yeah.
thirdly, it's the whole we don't know how religion will play out in the political sphere, right?
Good point.
So I'm feeling a bit pessimistic about it, but I want to feel optimistic. So I feel like, you know what, I'm gonna say something that's gonna kind of get right to the heart of it.
That's
And
great.
I think the responses have been amazing. So
Hmm.
a lot of people have reached out to me personally, because they seemed to be very moved by it. That's the common theme that
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
I've seen the reaction on Facebook from people who, two things that shocked me. Several of the people that knew you as a Christian
Mhm.
have commented saying, "Hey, I'm in a similar place. I've deconstructed too. I've deconverted too."
Yeah,
The thing that shocked me most is I've seen the people who said they've known you for the past 14 years
yeah,
and they would have never knew that you were
right.
once
Yeah,
religious, that you were
yeah,
once as into Christianity
exactly.
or the Bible or theology as you were. And that shocks me because I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible to have people in your orbit for over a decade and they can't even
Yeah.
conceive that you were once a Christian, but you
Yeah.
did that for 14
If
years.
any man is out of grace, he is a new
He's a new
creature.
creature.
Come on, the old is gone. Come on here, and the new has come.
Oh,
But I
That's what's
mean,
going
that's
on here.
perfect.
well, but I think that speaks to me because one of the reasons why I think I'm so active, not one of, yeah, one of the reasons, not the only reason, as a counter apologist or whatever I've been doing, is because my religious identity has been my identity.
Mm,
I don't even know what it's like to have an identity that's not tied to the religion. And so the only thing I felt like I could do is if I'm going to properly relate to it, since that is my identity, I have to relate to it as a public unbeliever because that's how, so it still has been sort of the core of my identity.
yeah.
But the reality is I don't believe it, but somehow it's still the core.
Yeah.
You've been able to have
Yeah,
your identity without religion as your core, and I envy that.
Mm, yeah. No,
yeah.
that's
I
it
guess you still
has.
live in.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay, go ahead.
I was just going to say this. In some sense, he poetically still is living in the grave where he has been buried with Christ. That is
I still
Brady.
got one foot in the
That
grave.
was just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What were you going to say,
Yeah.
Al?
No, I was gonna say that it has felt that way, yes, what you've described.
Hmm.
That like when I chose to, when I finally chose, I was like, this is all bunk, and trying to wrestle with feelings and thoughts and you know uh the conflict as well still that
Hmm.
somewhat existed, right? And then I was just like, I don't want to think about this crap anymore.
Hmm.
I just need to move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And a little bit of deconstruction here or there, but not
Hmm.
didn't dominate my life. And then yeah, it felt like, yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you meet new friends
and
and
then
you go,
Ichabod.
and then it got, yeah.
But
That's kind of,
pod, or as they say, but pod. They say but God. But pod, come on
yeah.
here. You were going
Hmm.
on a bunch of merry way. But pod.
But pod, exactly. But pod.
Yeah.
What was that Rome? What was that Ephesians? I can't remember what
Hmm.
chapter, but anyway.
Yeah, but
But
God who's rich and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I would say the what's been surprising about all of this, about me sharing this on social, has really been, I think, a reflection on
Hmm.
uh, how we are not alone, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like I think each one of you who are listening or watching right now, it's like you would be really surprised to
Hmm.
see how much you will relate to the people around you.
Hmm.
So, or they will relate to you,
Yeah.
So yeah,
Good
that's been
stuff.
the biggest
I'll
surprise.
say
Yeah.
this last thing about that. I think I don't want to push anybody to come out of the closet any sooner
Hmm.
than they're ready. But like you said, because of what's happening with religion in this country, on my Facebook page, there's a guy who put up a post. Uh, it was during the inauguration, "How great thou art," playing in the rotunda. And then under that, he wrote, "We're so back." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we're back,
Yeah.
baby, because
Yeah.
a hymn that we like is playing in the Capitol. We're back. Like, what?
Yeah.
What? When were you
I
ever
mean, look
there,
at that
first of all?
cartoonish prayer where the guy quoted a large swath of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just like, I mean, come on, man. We're in the year 2025. We got a space race going on,
Hmm.
and we're still beholden to this
Yeah.
nonsense. It was total theater. It's
Yeah.
like you
Hmm.
could see Donald Trump and them literally laughing. They're laughing in you evangelicals' faces.
Hmm.
Like this guy, did you see the guy? There was some CEO behind him. He was chuckling while the guy was, and Lord, it's like, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is going
We're
on? What
we're
is
so
going?
back, literally. We're so back, and that you dragged us back into the past with this nonsense. But
Yeah, we're back.
but one of the things I was going to say, Al, like for anybody who's coming out of the closet, not that you need to or have to do it, but in a time like this, what it does is for the people that think, "Oh, we're back." we're back in control, we're back in leadership, the Bible's gonna be back in schools, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
when they have to reckon with the fact that their loved ones, their friends, their coworkers, people that they know, like you, but you're not a theist the way that they are. You used to be a
Mm.
Christian, or you're agnostic, or you're atheist, whatever. What it does is it humanizes unbelievers. And so coming out of the closet is for you, but it's also helping to normalize unbelief so that people now have a picture of
Mm.
these godless unbelievers that they want to dunk on now. And now they got to think, oh wait, Al? I'm dunking on Al when I say we're back. I'm dunking on, you know what I mean? So I
Exactly.
just, yeah, I applaud you for that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I think
I just
yeah, go ahead, Jay. What?
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna say, I made a little mention to kind of Jay Witt and Brady at the end there, but I think I don't think I would have done it
Mm,
if I wasn't part of this for the last two
mm,
years or so. Yeah,
mm.
I don't know.
Mm,
Who
Yeah.
knows?
mhm.
But I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an announcement I need to make about N-urch. Even though this is the first N-urch of 2025, it actually is going to be the last N-urch, not of 2025, I hope, but for a while. Just because just internally, different schedules and things that we have going on is going to make it a little trying to try to have N-urch live every other Sunday for now. And I don't like doing the recorded versions because it takes a lot of time to record the episode, then edit the episode, and then rewatch the episode back with the live crowd. So, and also I said this last year too. We were looking to find ways to not have Al having to give up a half of his weekend by getting up early on a Sunday so often. So it buys us room. We're gonna after this one, we're gonna pause Nurture for a little bit. But there's some other ideas that I'm going to be doing in 2025 on Sundays. There's a new segment that I'm going to begin called Raising the Bar, where I'm actually going back through some of my old Christian rap lyrics and deconstructing them. So that'll be popping up on Sundays, and hopefully I'll have some guests, bar examiners, coming on helping to raise these
That's that,
bars.
that sounds real fun. That
Yeah,
sounds like a
man.
really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I like that.
I'm offering this to you guys too. If there's any
Okay.
old fanatic verses that's like, yo,
All
let's
right.
deconstruct that verse. For sure we'll be doing that. So
Mhm.
that's what's
Sounds
happening
good.
in
Yeah, yeah.
2025. Let's look at where we've been thus far. So we are actually
Yeah.
still in Job, even though we started with
Mhm.
Job back in uh what I want to say June of last year or something like that. No, it was it that late? I said, Jay Witt, you missed the cue. Like that was the
Yeah, you
cue.
missed the cue. Yeah, missed it again.
Always missing it, huh? Always missing it.
I thought I was so
There you
on
go.
point that time. We started mid last year, I think. We wrapped up Romans in Nurch, and then we shifted to Job. I think maybe September, so we shifted to Job. We got through the first 5 chapters, where we saw that the sons of God came together, and Satan was among them, who stirred up. He, as Al said, the Satan dysregulated Yahweh and made Yahweh basically attack Job. And to attack Job, to extend his hand towards Job, the way God did that was he gave the Satan permission to destroy Job's life, to kill his kids, have all his livestock stolen, to make him sick and cover his body with sores, and the whole idea is Job is not going to curse me, and that's the bet. Now we don't know what the Satan would get. We don't know what Yahweh would get, but we know what Job would get. Job would get his life destroyed. And so that's the first 5 chapters of Job is this scene is set up, and then Job's friends come and sit with him after about 7 days of just sitting and looking at how bad his situation is. They begin to speak. And once they start speaking, they almost don't stop, such that the next 30 plus chapters is just Job and his friends going back and forth, trying to hash out what's happening to him.
the Bible presents us with this story with basically the apologists, the never ending infinite regress of apologists kind of
Yes.
talk.
Yes.
Because you can see, left to their own devices, if God had not entered in, right? If Yahweh doesn't enter in chapter 38, if he doesn't enter in, there is no answer to any of their questions, and they all have a different theory of why things are the way they are. Just very much like the apologists that we are the counter to on this pod. It's very much the same kind of endeavor, you know.
Yeah.
But okay,
we'll come back to that point.
Let's quickly. No, go ahead. Say what you will.
I was going to say
go ahead.
The idea that when God comes, there's no answer until God comes in. I'm going to say when we get to that point, even when God steps in, there's no answer. But go ahead.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, very well. Yeah, that's very well said. So what we have here is you have essentially, I mean, you have the opening section, obviously, where they're kind of setting the stage, but you basically have a story being told to set you up for long swaths of just pure poetry. And it's very telling. It'd be interesting to interact with some Christians on this matter, because the poetry is all written in the same style, in the same voice, as far as I can see. I'm not looking at it in Hebrew, which means that even the writer, I'm assuming they wouldn't expect you to think that this is, four different individuals, or five, I guess, if you include the four friends and Job, who are all speaking in the same poetic voice, the same kind of vocabulary. And in fact, just forget the same voice. The fact that everyone interacting is speaking in poetry. Like, how many times have you seen a person, think about it. You would imagine going to the hospital to visit someone, and they're sick and they're really suffering physically. And every time they're speaking to you, they're speaking to you in somewhat of an exalted prose or poetry. Like, that's not likely. So, I'm, in terms of the literalism of it, I'm imagining even believers would, a thoughtful believer, I would imagine, would say, hey, this is the story being presented poetically. This isn't to be taken as, oh, these are the literal words, right? I mean, go ahead.
Well, I had several thoughts about that, because there were several times when I was reading where the skeptic and the counter apologist in me would see things, and I would say, if this is meant to be taken literally, this disproves the Bible at all, because you have parts where they're talking about, they talk about nature in the ways that other ancient people talked about nature. Like, they talk about the mountains being the pillars for the sky dome. Like, they share that idea with the Greeks, that the mountains are holding up the dome of the sky. Well, you find that in Job. But the way that the Christian would get out of that is they would say, oh, but that's just poetry. This whole thing is poetry. And several times I ran into things that made me say, I bet the Christian would say, oh, don't be bothered by that. That's just poetic. Or don't be bothered by that. That's just poetic. But the same person that would say that's just poetic would also say, oh, well, look at this verse in Job where it said God suspends the earth on nothing. How would they have known that God suspends the earth on nothing unless God was really... But wait, in this other passage over here where the natural description is clearly wrong, you would back away from that and say that's just poetic. But in this part over here...
or phenomenological.
Or phenomenological, right. Well, not even phenomenological, because, well, yeah, maybe. The mountains holding up the sky, if you perceive the dome, you could say it's phenomenological.
Well, I mean, they talk about light, the sun going into its chamber, that type thing. They would say,
all
okay,
of those
well,
things.
Not,
not knowing the source of light, like where does light come from? Where does darkness come from? The Christian that wants to hold up the validity of the Bible would say, that's poetic. But then you go to this other passage when you like the literal meaning of it, and you won't say that's poetic. You'll say God suspending the earth on nothing. That's literal, and that's proof that it was actually scientifically accurate. Like, how are you going to do both of those things at the same time?
I mean, I remember when going through the passage, realizing, God steps up and he does his speech, and you're like, all right, finally somebody's going to settle the matter, right? And then by the time he starts talking about, about Leviathan or whatever, and you're like this, you're like this
Rahab, tore Rahab in pieces.
Right.
Yeah. Can you tell me where light goes? It's like, actually, yeah, I can. Like, we know how it works. See? Like, it's like, but this shuts Job up. And you're just like, what? It's like, and I had the perfect analogy. I thought immediately of like when I went back and watched Lord of the Rings, which is an early 2000s release, and you see the special effects. It doesn't have to be Lord of the Rings. You can look at any old movie where at the time the special effects were cutting edge.
Right.
Then go back, 10, 15 years later, you watch it, you're like, it's not all that impressive. It's kind of like Yahweh entered in like with the flex that was like, Bronze Age flex. People probably were like, oh, this is the cutting edge. Like, yeah, shut up, Job. And he's like, we're like, nah.
So basically what you're saying is if God were to ask a modern day Job those questions, God would look sort of foolish. Like, can you tell me the source of light? Yeah. Can you tell me what makes lightning flash? Yeah.
Actually, I can. Yeah.
Right.
What's the sound of the thunder? Where's the thunder come from? All the things that were impressive to the audience then, sort of mundane.
He's talking about Orion and stuff,
right?
And you're like, bro, like that's the science you're talking about here. And the reason why it goes along with what you were saying is, it in its context, it shuts Job up. So there's a certain sense in which, I don't know, whatever you want to say it is, whether it's phenomenological or it's poetic, Job hears these like poetic, like the poetry is not shutting anybody up. It's only if you get what I'm saying. It's only if the poetry is actually reflective of some serious reality that it actually it results in you being like, oh, well, good point. I don't know, but like, yeah, okay.
I'm going to dive into chapter 23 and just poke around at a few things in 23, and then we'll keep it moving from there. Let me see.
What translation?
We're in the New English Translation, the NET.
Okay.
So there was a few times when I was taken aback at just how forward the author has Job's friends, like basically coming for Job's neck, where they just start getting down to the business of, bro, you've been defrauding the poor, you've been, harming the orphans and the widows and keeping back, like just straight coming at him. But the author's already told us that Job was blameless, and even God thinks Job is blameless. But his friends, looking at his situation, are saying, you can't be blameless because this doesn't happen to blameless people. And then they start trying to list and enumerate the ways he's not blameless, the sins that they think he's actually committed. On top of the pride of thinking that he could talk back to God, they start naming real life situations that they think he must have been. So I'm just like, if this were a real conversation, like with friends like these, who needs enemies? Like it was sort of like, wow. They really put some bold statements in his friends' mouths. But here in chapter 23, Job answers Eliphaz, and he basically says to Eliphaz, like, you all keep saying that the wicked get theirs. God's going to judge the wicked. But Job in chapter 23 says several things. In several of Job's responses, he makes it clear. He sort of says, actually, I don't think it's as you say. I don't think the wicked always get judged. Matter of fact, the wicked tend to go to their grave unbothered. They have the best time in life and they have the best funerals. I don't think it's true what you're saying, that the wicked are the ones that are being judged. But then he flips it and says, and here's how I know what y'all are saying is BS. Because not only do the wicked not get judged like you're saying, I'm blameless. And I'm getting the things that you're saying the wicked should get. So something is wrong here. And I'm trying to think, is it a particular verse that made that point stand out to me? He says, Even today, my complaint is still bitter. His hand is heavy, talking about God, hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I could come to his place of residence. I would lay my case before him. I would fill my mouth with arguments. I would know with what words he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me with great power? No, he would only pay attention to me. There, an upright person could present his case before him. I would be delivered forever from my judge. And then he sort of says here the opposite of what David said, right? David says, if I go into the deep, you are there. If I ascend to the heavens, you are there. Job says, if I go to the east, he's not there. If I go to the west, yet I do not perceive him. In the north, when he's at work, I do not see him. When I turn to the south, I see no trace of him. Basically saying, I wish I can get a word with this God to plead my case. If I could just get a word with him, I'd be able to show this God that I'm blameless, but I can't find him anywhere. And so this was just to me an interesting passage of Job saying, you all keep saying the wicked are going to get theirs. One, they don't. Two, I'm not wicked and I'm getting what the wicked should get. This is not right. And I wish not only there's the passage where he says, do you know the way to the home of light and dark? Job is saying, I don't know the way to the home of God, because if I did, I would come to his door and I'd make my complaint there and he would see that I'm blameless. So this passage just stood out to me for those reasons. Any thoughts or comments there?
Yeah,
I think
go ahead, Albert.
I think one comment I have though is that, ugh, when anyone deals with tragedy, right, like just like a lot of suffering, I think what tends to happen is, like you're flooded with emotions, you're flooded with anger. So many things are coming at you at this, at one time. Um, and you're trying to process all this stuff and trying to figure out and trying to rationalize your way through things. Like I don't know how much of that plays into the narrative here. Like, and I think when um like how much of this is like the emotional speculative things that come out of like when people are trying to release their frustration, anger, or sadness and
Mm,
stuff like that, or is it really like how should I say? It's like if God is stepping in and he's saying like, hey, listen, you guys are all, going nuts here about all this. Like, let me just lay it out for you. It's like if it's just as simple as that, that's like to me, it's just like I don't know how much like how much mileage are we getting with like
mm,
the amount of drivel that has to continue through like all this stuff. So I think
mm,
when Job thinks like proclaims like, as you pointed out, like, if God only knew, or if God, like how much of that is theological maybe in one sense, or but then how much of that is also just like trying to prove a point in this scenario. Like we get it, we already know
mm,
blameless, like so like why, like what's this like expulsion trying
mm,
to prove in any sense. So that's, and I'm only saying that now because I think, because I think when I talk later about 29 through 31 where he tries to vindicate himself, it's like we're like going like we're doing this all over again. So it's like
mm.
this kind of like manic like or just like spinning it like
Yeah.
just like constantly circling back to the thing. So that, that's my
Well, we can almost get right to it because
mhm.
the rest of the chapters between here and 29, it's just more of that cycle of that dribble of
Yeah.
people trying to come up with a reason for what they don't have a reason for. They keep trying to tell Job he must be in sin. Job keeps trying to tell them he's not. And they just keep going back and forth. And so the question remains, then why is this man being made to suffer? And then for the reader, the audience, clearly the point is, we said this before, the point has to be at least partially, you could do everything right and still suffer. And so we're not really going to get an answer for you as to why you're suffering. You just have to deal with the fact that for whatever reason,
Mm.
I think I took it down somewhere. Is it in the chapter? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think it's at the end of the chapter that I was just showing.
Mm.
Let me pull it back up.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that it seems that this book is full of so many quotes that go in so many different directions, and Christians, including Paul, as we'll later see, they cherry pick which ones they want to use for. Like this passage you just read, is what he says. But he knows the pathway that I take. If he tested me, I would come forth like gold. I've heard Christians talk about that. That I will come forth as pure gold. That they're quoting that passage, but in its context, it's talking about if I go to the east, he's not there. If I go to, it's basically saying if I could get an audience with him, but he's not around, I would be tested and be found to be righteous. Essentially, that's what he's saying, and that's counter to generally what the Christian message is. You go to Matthew 5, they say, hey, you think that you didn't lust after people when they said, you should have lusted, but I tell you, if you shouldn't commit adultery. You thought you didn't commit adultery, but I tell you, if you look lustfully at a woman, you already committed adultery with her in your heart. So it flies in the face of what Job is saying here. He's like, nah, you bring up the law. Was it Ray Comfort or whoever would go out on the street and
show you how you've broken the Ten Commandments,
and challenge people? Yeah. Well, it sounds like if he walked up, if we could do a thought experiment of him running up on Job with that, Job would be like, nah.
Yeah, right.
You'd be like, oh, you lusted, therefore you committed adultery. Job would be like, nah, that don't really cut it. I have kept the law.
Well, here goes right here.
Interesting to imagine.
Here goes right here, verse 13. Verse 12. Verse 12, talking about God's law, or at least God's commands, because we don't know if this is we don't know what stage this story is from. If this is pre-Abrahamic, post-Abrahamic, if the Jews just borrowed this and made it their own and put Yahweh's name in it, we don't know, because none of the typical allusions to the things that Israel from Israel's history, none of that shows up in this book. And so we don't know if we're talking about the Ten Commandments or whatever, but talking about God's commands, verse 12, he says, I have not departed from the commands of God's lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my allotted portion, more than the food that I eat. He is unchangeable, and who can change him? Whatever he has desired, he does. He fulfills his decree against me. As many such things are his plans. So basically, he's like, I'm doing everything God commanded me to do, but for some reason, God has determined to do these things to me, and he's fulfilling all these decrees against me. Whatever he's planned to do against me, that's what he's doing. And there's nothing that I did to bring this on myself, which is just a very sad commentary on why the people of God, think about whether this was originally an Israelite passage or not. They embraced it because for some reason they felt like this speaks to our experience with our God. Even when we do the things he commands us to do, it seems like he was determined to F with us, and this is our lot. And there's nothing we can do about it. It's just a sad commentary.
Yeah. It makes me think of the rich young ruler who came in Matthew 19 and give away. And people often use this, preachers use that to say, passages Jesus looked at him and loved him after he said that, almost like, oh, you're so naive. You actually think you kept all the commands. No, Job is coming with that same energy. Job is keeping that same energy of the young man who came to him, the rich young man who comes to him and says, yo, I've kept all of the commands. That's exactly the energy, Job. And he doesn't change, and God never reprimands him for it. That's spoiler alert. He never tells him, your problem is, he never says, like Jesus says to the rich young ruler, but the problem is you got a heart issue. You're resting on your own righteousness. He never says that to Job.
Yeah. Job's friends say it
like
to
he
him.
Acknowledges it.
Job's friends say you're resting on your own righteousness, but God never says that. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, he never says it.
Yeah.
Al, you talked about chapter 29?
Yeah, well, you can't talk about 29 in isolation. It's pretty much 29 through 31.
Okay.
But, it's basically Job's final argument. Yeah, his final defense. He'll talk about his former life, and then he'll talk about all the compassion that he has, all the blessings that he's given to others, and then the reputation he had, all of the confidence he has around it. And then also on top of that, like he's kind of piling on like, okay, like this is who I was, but now you guys are just like attacking me like crazy. It's like why it's like, then so I mean, I'm just trying to process this whole idea of like Job believing that he can be vindicated. And I guess that it maybe speaks to because like obviously how many readers, right, in history have read this and thought like, oh, that's me. I'm Job, right? Like how much do they identify with how much he's suffering? And that they might convince themselves that they've been blameless as well, as he describes. But let's say maybe they don't. Maybe they think like, okay, I there's no way I'm like Job. So it just more or less, I think this just speaks to the futility of the whole thing, right? It's like works. It's all you're, being blameless, like following the commandments, and um, but then it's like, but then it's that's so there is a sense that it's not enough, right? I guess
You
we can
don't think that
agree.
it legitimizes your suffering? Like, it could it be an a fortiori argument, sort of like this fictitious character of Job, where it's like if he was perfectly righteous, he still suffers at the hand of God. You know you're not perfectly righteous. If you're suffering, you might actually submit for your actual deeds. But even if you weren't, you wouldn't have any grounds for an argument. You know what I mean? Like, could this book be presenting the
Okay.
reader with like, yo, if this guy who's just superlatively righteous ends up suffering just like for no apparent purpose, you basically don't have is it could be the silent what does he say to silence the mouths of the obstreperous. Like it could be so that he silences people from ever making a complaint.
Maybe Jay Witt,
So
maybe. Well, go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
no, I was so I think that was the point that I was trying to get to. Yeah, it's like it's eventually it becomes the futility of speaking, the futility of your own thoughts or complaints becomes to the point where like no one really has a right to say anything, like it's to raise any complaint at all. So yeah,
But
go ahead, Brady.
but it's not because like Jay Witt talking about the uh, argument from the greater to the lesser. If this great man can suffer, and God can still find fault in him, how much more you? And they even say several times in here, like God even finds fault in the moon and the stars and the heavens and the heavenly bodies. If
Yeah.
God can find, if God
Yeah.
can find fault in them, how much more you're a maggot. Like it even says, you're a maggot. Men are maggots. It literally says this.
Yeah. hmm
But that's one of the friends making that point. When God speaks, God never makes that point about I can find fault in whoever I want. In God's conversation, it's not about fault at all. So it's like, yeah, maybe on one hand there is that argument from the greater to the lesser of, but no, from God's perspective in this book, it's not about finding fault at all. It's about you don't even have the right to ask me why you're going through this. Fuck finding fault.
Right.
I get to do this
Well,
to whoever I want.
well, the pushback. Okay, a little pushback here, right? Because I feel like there's a little nuance. There's some nuance here.
Okay.
Because there's the idea that okay, yes, we all are in agreement that ultimately God isn't even really dealing with the fact. This is almost like a kangaroo court because none of the facts regarding Job's life or anybody else's life matter really to this because we've been told right from the start. This is just this is a bet between God and the Satan character.
We've been
right?
told it's a bet. We've been
that
told
from
that Job is blameless. So those two things have to always factor into
Yeah.
what's really going on.
Yeah. But at the same time, so we don't want to bifurcate this falsely. Both can be true. That can be true as a general truth, but it could also be the case. Part of the reason why they don't present you with a character who's flawed at all, he's blameless, is so that whenever, and they also, through the friends and Joe's speculation, is like, well, maybe I deserve this if I had done X, Y, and Z. And the reader can see themselves in all of those descriptions. It's like, well, he's describing me there. Look, maybe I would have deserved it if I did this, and that. Go ahead, go ahead. I can see
No, no,
your
no,
wheels
because
turning,
I'm
Dave.
trying to hear what you're saying. I don't want anybody to get lost. What the disagreement here between us is, you're saying it's not that Job has to be, you have to find fault in Job at all. It's the fact that you can't find fault
Hmm.
in Job that makes it all the more likely that the people you can find fault in, then they could or should expect some of this. And I'm saying,
Well, see,
okay,
no, Job himself, no. So, all right, let me interject there.
mhm,
Job himself presents it like if I had done X, Y, and Z, then this would be met, but I haven't. So as soon as he
right,
said if I did X, Y, and Z, and then you say, well, he just named my sin. If like he at one point he says if I looked at a woman lustfully or whatever,
right,
a,
right,
a young maiden, right? He's like,
right.
oh, somebody might say, oh, that's me. He's describing me. He's like, oh, then I would deserve this. It's like, okay, so therefore, if I go through something and he's just described what I'm actually doing, it's almost like it isn't a 40-year argument because it's like everywhere there is a spectrum all the way from that to this, and I'm not Job,
But I
which they know no one
disagree.
who's reading. Go
I
ahead, I'm
hear,
listening.
no, I hear you. Maybe Al, you could be the arbiter here. I hear what you're saying. Like, how much more if I am doing the things that Job listed that he's not doing and he still gets it, how much more me? But if you're an astute reader, an astute thinker, that really still can't be the comfort like, oh, I guess I deserve it when I get it, because it's not about deserving. It's not about deserving at all. It's about
For
God
Job,
having,
no, for Job. But hold up. It's not about deserving for Job, who's set up there as
right,
like
right.
almost like a period at the ends of both sentences. You're not going beyond this and you're not going beyond that, but you are in there somewhere. Job, you're not Job.
But
Nobody who's reading this is
you still
Job.
have to think though, okay, maybe I do deserve it because I did lustfully look at a woman or I did da. But in your mind, so let's say you say, okay, so how do I get out of this so that next time I don't get this? I won't lust anymore. I won't do that anymore. I won't da. But no, even if I did do all those things right, I could still get this. So it's not really serving
Exactly.
the purpose
I
of,
agree. I agree
okay,
with you. We're not disagreeing. I'm saying it's both.
okay.
So my point is both those things. It's
Mm,
saying you don't. There is no way to basically at the end of the day argue that you shouldn't go through stuff.
mhm,
Even if you were Job, it could happen, and you're likely not Job, and you actually deserve what's happening to you. So it's basically a way to take away any way to accuse Yahweh of doing
mhm,
you wrong. And
yeah.
he shows a perfect guy. That guy has no argument before God because he's like, well, what do you know about Leviathan? It's like, well, what the hell does Leviathan have to do with what I'm going through?
Yeah,
But that
that's
apparently shuts Job's mouth. Go ahead, Albert. I'm
right.
sorry.
Yeah, no. So I think I think I align with the general line of reasoning here. So I think what's I mean, look, if we can circle back again to what the original bet was, right? It's like,
Mhm,
okay, like I bet, okay, if Job does, if this happens to Job, I bet you he's going to curse you. And so in God, and I guess in his confidence, right, that he said that no, I won't. You can do whatever you want, and blah blah. Blah, I'll just let you do it. Um, and then the conversation
Just don't
takes.
kill him.
Yeah, just don't kill him. But no, but here's the thing. So then what happens is then it happens to Job. He goes through all that suffering, and then all the friends and all the dialogue that happens for many chapters. And then it's almost like it's almost like the reader doesn't know what might happen. And then when God kind of but then God still needs to step in and then still, yeah. So he doesn't curse God, but then God still but he raises the complaints and the legitimacy of based on this works, righteousness system. He still raises the complaint, and then God still has to come in and say, put him in
mm,
his place, still yet again, which is maybe a little
Hmm.
confusing, like in that, and for me, like
yeah.
it's just it's like because if the story just ended like, well, okay, well, Job just says, cries out and says, I don't know why this is happening to me. I've been righteous. But I know that God is good and he's done everything and
Mm,
blah, blah, blah. And therefore, I'm just going to be content with what I have, despite the fact that I'm homeless and whatever, just afflictions everywhere. Like it chooses not to end that way. It chooses to end with God asserting himself, his authority, his right. So I don't know. So I'm still processing that aspect of it, I think.
Like life is not a meritocracy. It
Right.
almost seems like one of the points of the book is, look, things are going to come. So this is another thought I had while I was listening to you, is that it's also possible that they're letting you know that you might not be able to pinpoint the specific sin that you're being punished for. So you know what I mean? Like you could be being pretty much righteous in a lot of ways, and just because you're experiencing like a lot of evil doesn't mean you've done something that correlates to to what the evil that you're going through. No, I'm not saying this well. Whatever you're going through doesn't necessarily correlate to a deed that you can identify. But they do present I can't not see the presentation of both Job and his friends, how they spend a lot of time outlining a lot of things that people do wrong that deserve punishment. And it's like they basically, you can't avoid they covered all of the ground in all of those chapters. They cover pretty much everything, like whether it's not being generous enough or thinking wrongly about other people or thinking too highly of yourself. There's some way in which you've not done the right thing. But at the same time, you can't, even if you see those things, you can't necessarily correlate those things to specific, a correlation basically doesn't imply causality. I guess Job and his friends are arguing that correlation doesn't apply, right? I mean, is that fair? You guys think it's fair?
Yeah. I mean, that's the point that I was making, is there's no causality in any of this in terms of what God's allowing to happen to Job. There is no causality. So to me, that takes away from the authority argument, because you can't pinpoint it to anything. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, no, the fact when you first said that, all right, I was like, okay, that's a great point. And so it doesn't what is it? It's almost like nihilism, but with the existence of God. You know what I mean?
Spiritual
That's a good way to
nihilism?
put it,
A
yeah.
spiritual nihilism.
No, well, you know what, Al, to your point, though, I wasn't going to share this, but since you said that,
Theistic nihilism.
since you said that, there were very many times, because Job keeps talking about, I don't know if this is the only comfort that he can find, but he keeps going back to going down into the grave. And he talks about the wicked going into the grave and
Right.
how they go into the grave, and even he's going to go into the grave, and that will be comfort for him. But both the wicked and the righteous, at some point, you're both going to find yourself in the grave. And there were several times when he mentioned the grave that I kept saying, because they had no thought of the afterlife in their thinking at this time, it's nowhere in their cognitive arsenal of an afterlife. He makes it clear that the grave is it. And so there were several times in this that I was like, it really does suck. And it really does make you think of nihilism, because if you don't have pleasure in this life, for Job, this is all there is.
Yeah.
And there was a strong sense of, for me, it was like it triggered my nihilism. Like, damn, why suffer if the grave is all you ought to get your pleasure now, get your whatever you're going to get it now, because all you're saying is, damn, I got to go to the grave like this. At least I could have lived a little bit before I got there.
It's also more telling when you understand that when you look at the Old Testament, a lot of times the way you live is correlated to how you're blessed.
Oh yeah.
So like you said,
even in
because
here,
they're not looking for an afterlife. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So it's like if I get the short end of the stick here and I don't even believe in an afterlife, like that's why it seems that all he wants at some point here in verse, what was it, chapter 19 or whatever, he wants an audience. He just wants to be vindicated. It's at that point, it's like, all right, my life is crap. Just vindicate me. Just like at least say I didn't deserve this, you know? That's what it comes down. That's the only thing he's begging for, Dan. He just wants vindication. He doesn't, and vindication doesn't equate to give me justice. It's just I
Yeah.
just want you to
Mhm.
announce my innocence. Really.
Mhm.
The thought occurred to me as you guys both were talking, because I think it like I almost feel like in the Old Testament when, Job being one of the oldest books, it gives you some framework to how to deal with suffering, I guess. But I'm just thinking like as time went on,
Mhm.
as other books were added, other stories, ideologies, and I wonder if they just felt like, no, this sucks. Like it doesn't cut it. Like we have to come up with something a little better than this. I mean,
Well,
yeah, go
well, here's what I
ahead.
wonder if that coming up with something better. Here's how they
Uh-huh.
deal with the nihilism. Um, the fact that they don't believe in an afterlife is why the book ends the way
Hmm.
it does. You have to make the second
Hmm.
part of Job's life better than the first half because
Right.
there is no
Hmm.
afterlife. And so the way that you
Hmm.
reward Job is you give him back, you give him more kids, you give him beautiful daughters, you make his name great again, you double everything he had because you have to get it
Yeah.
here in this life. Which for me, because I am zooming the camera lens back, because I did at one time in my life, it's almost like it's almost like I've been poisoned by having the Christian hope at one time.
Hmm.
Because I did have this thought of an afterlife and eternity. Now to zoom me back to there is none of that and then make me read a book like Job, it's like, well, damn, if this is all there is, that puts me back in the mindset that they had pre afterlife thought. And it
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
proves how important it is to end the book the way that they did. If they had the thought of a heaven, they would have never needed to end the book the way that they did that, at that time.
So
Hmm.
I'm thinking about the context of let's say like when when Israel was judged by God,
Mm,
uh, the Babylonian captivity, right? Living under Roman rule. Like the fact that you don't have a homeland or you
mm,
don't have dominion over your own
mm,
people, and you're being attacked by other nations.
mm,
So you're not living out the blessings of what God has promised, because you're under the boot of other, nations and
mm,
states. So I'm just thinking it's like maybe that's partly could explain how, basically Job is not enough. Like it's not enough to just, have that as the functioning framework for how, we're going to be blessed or be shown
But it's a
prosperity at some
perfect
point.
ideology. It's a perfect
Oh
ideology
yeah.
for a group of conquered people.
Yeah.
It's like, on the one hand, you can give them the passages that you see, if my people are called by a humble self praise, you see my face turn from you, then I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive the sin, heal the land. You have passages on the one hand that give them that as a solution. Repent. If you
Hmm.
reform your ways, God's going to restore the Davidic kingdom or whatever. Then you have this book, which is a different. I would have in the past looked at it univocally and tried to find a way to align this with it, but maybe this is just another way to deal with the fact that they go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, no. Granted, yes, I agree, but I'm also just thinking about just speculating a little bit, hypothetical. But it's just the idea of like, think about the Pharisees and Sadducees who tried to live the law and be righteous, and this is the way. And maybe they thought like this was the way that God is going to
Mm,
liberate us from rule, and then you can just see people being really cynical about that. It's like, really? Like you guys are.
mm,
You guys are saying that we got to live this certain way and all this stuff. You're taking all our money, you treat us shitty and all that stuff. I mean, it's like then, I could just see how the cynicism can
mm.
easily just overtake that entire kind of,
True.
yeah, just
But
just
I could get there though, to what Jay Witt was saying.
mm.
I could, don't stone me, fellas. I could make this univocal. I could say, in the same way that people say Adam and Eve was really just a metaphor for the nation of Israel. Here you got people placed in the ideal geographic location. God gives them a command. They disobey the command, and so they're ejected from that location. Well, that's a metaphor for Israel getting the commandments of God in Canaan, not keeping them, and so they, get exiled in Babylon. In the same way, Job could be a very, very similar story, where God God gave us commands, and maybe we kept them or maybe we didn't. But even still, if you look at the way Job responds to God's challenge of, I get to ragdoll you anytime I want. You don't know where light comes from. You don't know how you going to challenge me. Job's response to God is, you know what? You're right. I'd only heard of you before. Now I've seen you, and now I know that I can't question you. If I can just accept that you get to dispossess me anytime you want, because there's a verse, I think I wrote it down. I didn't write it down. I think it's somewhere in God's speech, maybe chapter 40 or 41, where God says, "Everything under the heavens, I own it. Everything under the heavens is mine." And it's almost like it clicks for Job, like, oh, so you get to do whatever you want with whatever you want because it's all yours. And let me just finish this point real quick. When Job submits to that logic, that reasoning of you get to do whatever you want and I can't challenge it, when Job submits to that, God says, okay, now you get it. Now I'll bless you again. It could be for Israel, the point could just be, so what, you thought you kept the commandments and you're still in bondage. So what, you thought you shouldn't be happy to you, and it is. If you just embrace and submit to God's sovereignty, that even if you did keep the commandments, he still gets to do this to you. If you embrace that, then God will bless you as a nation, so that the second part of your life as a nation will be like the second part of Job's life, because he didn't deserve it either, but he still ended up getting blessed at the end once he accepted it. So it could be an ideology still, is all I'm saying.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, it made me think of the classic interview with Sway, or the other moment with Kanye. They're both Kanye moments where, well, basically what I'm saying is, when you look at the way God is arguing, he doesn't argue like Christian apologists who try to actually deal with he throws in a bunch of non sequiturs. Like, like if you look at the argument, it's like
Bible brain.
Job is talking very specifically about like his situation. And then he's like, where were you when I put the pillars and this and that? It's like, what the does that have to do with what we're talking about? That's a non sequitur. Like it's like when Ye was on Sway's show, and Sway's like talking to him about business, and he's like, "You ain't got the answers, but it ain't Ralph," because I don't know if you remember. Ye was asking him at some point. He starts telling him, "Well, I've done some I've done some little investment in fashion." He said, "But it ain't Ralph though." It's like you're not. Like, that's not how you have a constructive argument or conversation with just somebody just pulling a rabbit out the hat and just being like, where were you? Oh, but did you see when I dunked the ball? It's like, okay, yeah, you can dunk a basketball. Back to the fact that I have boils all over my skin. Like, what does it have to do? Like, it has nothing to do. Like, you're just pointing me to extraordinary things you can do and stuff that doesn't have ish to do with my situation. Right? So that's what you call an argumentation, a non sequitur. And it's a logical fallacy to tie non sequiturs in. And this happens all the time. I mean, you can have people say Elon did the Nazi, he did the Heil Hitler thing or whatever. He did the Nazi salute. They're like, well, it's a Roman. He did a Roman salute. That's a bit of a non sequitur here because we're not in Rome. He's not a Roman. They don't have, like historically, that has nothing to do with us. The one that's more historically relevant is the the Yahtzee salute, right? So it's just like, when people enter in total non sequiturs, when you're talking to people, you get called on it. This is the only reason why I'm making this point. When God does it, somehow you're supposed to put your hand over your mouth and you're supposed to think it's wise. Now, if we took the same, I would love to do this in almost like a mathematical equation style, take the same unrelated material, sort of unrelated material, and just change the topic and change the characters. Take Job out, make him, let's make him Henry or something. Take God and make him Tyshawn or something, right? They're talking to each other, and make the comments that Tyshawn is saying in response to Henry just as much of a non sequitur to no one would look at that conversation and think that he's adequately refuting the propositions that Henry is setting forward. Henry would be like, you lied on me and had me jailed for no good reason. And I spent 3 days. He's like, but yeah, do you see the fact that I designed a Tesla? Like, and he was like, what does that have to do with the fact that you had me jailed? Like,
so we're dancing around. Real quick, Joe, we're dancing around God's side of the conversation. I would think after all this time, maybe it's worth just at least putting it on the screen. Because like I said,
let's get it.
We've been building around this for the last couple of months. Let's at least.
And it's funny that Paul in Romans 9, Paul, when he's given a similar kind of like basically shut your mouth up type argument. But he quotes from here. He quotes that God should repay him. He's basically who has first given to me that I should repay him. It's the same time that Brady alluded to. It had thoroughly like saturated Paul of double predestination, that is election and reprobation. He's okay with the fact that God is preordaining and electing people to both salvation and to reprobation. And when people say, well, why should he find fault in us? He's like, just shut up. Who are you to ask? And then culminates in this great sonnet of praise in Romans 11, where he's like, who's ever given to God?
Yeah.
Who has known what he says? Who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? It's Job type talk. Who's ever given to God that God should repay him? For from him and to him and through him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. That's how he closes that whole section.
I mean,
it's one of the few places that Job's quoted.
I'm reminded of like certain films that you might watch where, if somebody raises a thing to the boss, or let's say a villainous character. I think what makes it scary partly is the fact that you don't know what they might say or do, but when they end up doing is a non sequitur. It's not related to what the complaint or the question at hand is, and it turns out that they use intimidation as a way instead of just trying to tell you what's up or what's going on or why what's going on here. That is what we see in the text. We see that in Job. We see that in Romans, where it's really just intimidation instead of an actual explanation.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
I don't even know that I want to read any of this except for to say, so the fourth guy, the young guy that speaks up, who we have no idea that he was even there, and then somehow he's written in. Matter of fact, I'm curious, when Job's friends show up, does it say that it was just 3 of them? Like, where do we get the fact that it was 3 of them from? Because it's not until you get to chapter 33 that you realize, oh, there's a 4th one. Does it ever say that Job's 3 friends came to visit him? Because that might even be more proof that 4th guy is an added character. Let me see. Yes, in chapter 2, verse 11, it says, when Job's 3 friends heard about all his calamity that happened to him, each of them came from his own country, and then it names them, and the young guy is not there. So there's a reason, like you said, Jay, he looks like he comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't fit. He probably was written in way after the fact.
Yeah.
More likely. I was trying to figure out was, does this young guy add anything to the conversation that wasn't really covered already? In some ways, he doesn't, though he does have a unique approach. He talks about God speaking in different ways. Sometimes God will speak the first time and the second time and the third time, maybe through a vision or a dream or whatever, but then he'll start speaking through the pain that you experience. So he does show up sort of almost like an apologist for these other 3 that didn't quite cut it, but he doesn't really add much to the conversation. One of the things I realized was they had got a long preamble to get him into the conversation. Like before he even says what he wants to say, he preambles for almost a whole chapter. Like, listen to me, Job, because I know I'm not.
He even gives you he gives you an excuse for why he hadn't spoken up too. He was like, the only reason why I've spoken up now is that I was way younger. It's like, it's like, this sounds a little fishy.
Exactly.
You know, I've been sitting here silent all this time, and you know, I just being the youngest one felt like I'd give you guys the floor. But now that y'all have spoken, here the young boy, you know, the YN, the YN, okay. Elihu the YN, right?
So, but here's the thing I was looking for. When the young guy spoke, there was a little bit different of a change of trajectory, but he kind of said the same things. But then when the Lord speaks, I was waiting for him to say something different. But he doesn't really say anything different than what Job's friends had been saying.
Yeah.
So it's almost like what the Lord's conversation, Lord ends up having a problem with Job's three friends. But I'm sitting here like, they didn't say anything different than what the Lord is saying.
Is it possible that the book ends at 31 and that 32 through 42 is the add-on? That Elihu, the young guy, the young boy, that he's an add-on, and even God, when he comes in, because God doesn't really, all he does, like you say, is throw his weight around for a couple chapters, and then it gives us a clean tie up at the end. Is it possible that the book ends, like the wisdom poem happens in 26, and Job's defense, and that's where we were supposed to be left at the end of 31?
It's possible,
like,
but
I
don't see that would be very anticlimactic. I don't, like if he's just because he's just that. Like, do you think what's the lesson?
Well, we do have that odd chapter 27. The wisdom poem is very odd. We don't know who it is that's talking at all. So it's possible that it ends before Job's. I don't want to just keep speculating, but it's just like 26. You have that thing, and then it, you know, I don't know. It's just I know that several non sequiturs might be an assertion.
There's several non sequiturs. One of the biggest non sequiturs is this all kicks off because Satan challenged the Lord, but Satan never comes back up, and you never see how their conversation. Like, does God ever say to Satan, "Told you so"? You know, like there's nothing. Yeah, so there's a sequitur there that kind of makes you wonder.
Right.
Could the beginning be an add-on? You know what I mean? Like we really don't even know what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and I think this is poetic. And again, I love this paradigmatic of the entirety of the 66 books. What you have is the creation of human hands and people sort of piecemealing and aggregate, or Isaiah, which has several different authors, or the canon itself, which is just the product of people putting things together. Like, if there's any meaning and sense that we bring to it, or harmony, we are bringing it to it. Yeah. There is no univocal kind of approach. There's no one voice. This book is clearly, whether it's parsed up the way I'm speculating or not, it does seem that this is made by a committee. There's no like God saying, let us make Job. No, this is a book that's the product of at least probably two different authors, if not more, people putting things together. And it may have even emerged from an oral tradition prior to it.
Two things that stand out to me. We can wrap it up here. One, when the Lord does speak, he speaks out of a whirlwind, and he speaks about all the natural things that he created, which once again to me says, every time you ask God to be and demonstrate that he is supernatural, it's interesting that the only thing he's able to do is to produce natural things. The whirlwind is a natural thing. The things that God takes credit for, the thunder, the lightning, the beasts, and all, it's always natural things that is proof of the supernatural, but never the supernatural. And so there's that aspect. Job's wanting a conversation with God. We get a conversation from God that is, like you said, Jay-Witt, a total non sequitur that doesn't answer any questions. And yet somehow, the way this is written, it scratches the itch for Job, and Job repents and says, now that I've seen you, I take it all back, and I repent in dust and ashes.
Ashes. Yeah.
So even
and at least he has that though, right?
Well, what do you mean?
At least there's I'm saying that was to the to the Christian who looks at us skeptics and we're like, all right, just give us the Job treatment. At least show up in a tornado or something. Like,
Right.
at least give us the whirlwind. At least he has that. Like, it's like, okay, you're speaking in total non sequiturs, but at least you showed up. You bothered coming to the occasion. But we don't even get that.
Yeah, we don't even get
Job's
that.
book telling
Unless
us
you want to count the fires in Los Angeles, maybe like for the Christians who stay with you.
fire tornadoes.
Yeah,
Fire tornadoes for sure.
But nonetheless, it does the trick for Job, and Job repents after all his complaining. If I could just get a word in with God, Job repents. Okay, so to me, it's a bad ending there, but it's not over yet. Job's restoration at the end of chapter 42. God is angry at Job's three friends, which sort of maybe also adds to the idea that the fourth guy was an add-on, because God doesn't end up being mad at the fourth guy, but the fourth guy doesn't really say anything different than the other three said.
So why doesn't he catch some heat?
He doesn't catch heat either. Yeah. But here's what God does. God tells the three friends, you go make an offering, present it to Job, and once Job prays for you, then I'll forgive you so that you don't get the same treatment. Which was a weird thing for me to see. Like, why can they not just repent to God? Why does Job have to pray for them in order for God to forgive them?
That reminds me of Moses, though, right? With Aaron and Miriam, where they had to he had to beg their pardon for them. Remember when they spoke up against them and got leprous? Then he had to I wonder if that's just the older way of things being. Is like, yeah, you got to go back to that guy, because that ethic isn't in the New Testament so much, right?
Let me just read it real quick. After the Lord spoke these things to Job, this is after Job repented in sackcloth and ashes, or dust and ashes. God says to Eliphaz, the Temanite, my anger is stirred up. So he's speaking to the guy. We could take care of this right now because I'm speaking to you. But no, watch what happens. My anger is stirred up against you and your two friends because you have not spoken about me what is right, as my servant Job has. So now, take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job will intercede for you. Why does Job have to intercede for them? He's talking to him. My servant Job will intercede for you. Hold on. My servant Job will intercede for you, and I will respect him so that I do not deal with you according to your folly, because you have not spoken what is right about me, as my servant Job has. Go ahead.
I speculate this is after the priesthood is obviously doing their thing, for one. Because I think that that's the only thing I had to say, is that it seems that it's kind of normalizing going to this intermediate to intercede for you and bringing offerings. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take my critical. This is a random. I have no expertise to back it up, but it just strikes me that this is buttressing the whole sacrificial system. So I'm imagining by the time this was written, they had an organized kind of priesthood.
Let's recall Job was doing that, representing his children, right? Yeah. When they were, yeah. So it's the same.
But I would imagine, though, if there was a priesthood, unless Job was a priest, he would not be doing that. So this sort of also makes it seem almost Melchizedekian, like sort of pre.
No, I'm talking. I'm talking.
You said post.
I'm talking to the audience. Yeah, I'm speaking about.
So you mean it having a rhetorical impact on the audience to be going to the priest?
Oh, yeah, exactly. You get what I'm saying. Yeah,
gotcha. Got it.
Like it's, so they're telling a story that is supposed to have occurred before there was a priesthood, with implications that they could draw about how they've been behaving in their present.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting insight. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, well, we did it. We made it through the book of Job. I hope it was entertaining, if not instructive, for you just to know the level to which you were being gaslighted, to think about why things happen in the earth, who's responsible for them, and what is the potential remedy when these things happen. Hopefully you can look at N-urch covering the book of Job and realize the last thing you need to be doing to try to figure out what's going on with you is doing what Job was doing, making sacrifices and sitting around with people who are going to talk to you about God and tell you it's your sin that's the reason for these things, and then have a God come and tell you, even if you didn't sin, I'd still be fucking with you. Like, get this out of here. We don't need to be. We need to be seeking real life solutions for real life problems, and the book of Job is neither. So there you have it. Yeah. So thank you guys for rocking with us. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed. Hit that like button for sure. Drop a comment, not just on the live, drop a comment under the episode. That'll help us out. And share this stuff, y'all. Share what's happening here. And we'll catch you on the next one. Much love. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.